welcome to today's conversation. My name is Troy Mayers. I am pumped to have you here. Today, we're talking about which lens system to stick on the front of your Canon C70. Native RF glass or speed boosted EF. Let's dive in. In a recent video of mine, I talked about my Canon C70 all-purpose rig, and in that video I was using an RF mount lens. And that garnered a couple questions from people that watched the video. Rusk and Kyle, Reach Films, they reached out to me and asked why I went with an RF mount lens over like a speed boosted EF. And we had some great back and forth, and I wanted to open up that conversation to everybody, give you guys my opinions, hopefully get your opinions on this debate down in the comments below. So to begin with, I wanted to start with just kind of a baseline of some indisputable facts as it comes to the EF and the RF mount systems for the C70. All right, so we'll do kind of a pros and cons. And the pros and cons when it comes to the EF mount lens, the first pro is going to be that you can use the EF to RF 0.71x speed booster. Now, if you're not familiar with that, it gives you the ability to adapt your EF glass to this RF mount camera, but in the process, it gives you a wider field of view. Because we're working with a Super 35 sensor, this gives you a field of view that's more closely related to, say, a full frame field of view. And the last thing that sensor gives you is one extra stop of light. We're capturing more light and funneling it to the sensor. So you get the extra stop. That is a definite pro, and probably the biggest pro in my opinion when it comes to using the EF lenses on the C70. All right, the other pros of the EF lenses, this is some quality glass. This glass has been out for decades, 30, 40 years, and they've been refining this glass all along the way. It's got quite the pedigree, and it's been used at a professional level across the world. So that is nothing to scoff at. Another pro of the EF lens is it's a fully developed ecosystem of lenses. All of the lenses that are going to exist for this system are already out there. They've already been tested and proven, and they're ready for you to buy. They're probably even in stock somewhere, or you can find a quality copy on the used market. So that is another big pro. And with the EF lenses and all of their glory and all the different versions of them that are out there, they're also a very versatile lens. You can find an adapter to stick an EF lens on the front of just about any camera system out there. From ARRI to Red to Sony to even Canon's own RF systems, you can find an EF adapter that will get that lens onto that camera. So you get an incredible versatility on using your EF lenses. So those are a couple of the pros for the EF mount lenses, but there are a couple cons as well. And one of the cons I wanted to talk about as it relates to using an EF lens with the speed booster on the C70 is there is the potential to get some flaring and washout because of that speed booster. We're capturing that wider field of view. We're also getting some more light, which introduces some light leaks, which, like I said, washes out the image and lowers the contrast. I've had this happen to me personally. I was able to salvage it in post, but that's not ideal. We want to be capturing these images as best as possible in camera. Now, yes, I should have caught that, but this is one more thing to think of and be aware of on set when you already have 1,000 things to think about. So I'm going to mark that down as a con. On that point of having one fewer thing to think about, another con of the EF mount lens for the C70 is just that. This is an EF lens with an RF camera, which means we're going to need some kind of adapter, be it the speed booster, the drop-in ND, the regular EF to RF adapter. That's, again, one more thing to think about, one more potential point of failure, one more thing to forget at your studio and not make it into your bag when you get on set. So that's going to be a con. It's not a native mount. The next con is going to be that this is older tech, and that starts to show itself in some of the electronic systems of these lenses, specifically, say, the autofocus. The autofocus is on par for the most part with the RF lenses, but the way that it goes about focusing isn't quite as good. You see this in the focus breathing of these EF lenses. Generally, it's more pronounced. That zoom effect of focus breathing is more prominent on the EF lenses compared to the RF counterparts, as well as the actual sound the motors make when you're focusing back and forth. EF motors are usually louder, again, than the RF counterparts. So the older tech and the lower quality autofocus and focus breathing and focus sound are going to be cons of the EF lenses on the Canon C70. So let's move over to the pros and cons of the RF lenses. And the first one is going to be very obvious in that it is an RF mount lens for an RF mount camera. These two things, these systems were designed to go together. One was made for the other and vice versa. And I think that is very much a pro of the RF lenses. The next pro is going to be quality glass as well. Canon has been able to take all of that experience from the last 30 years of making professional quality lenses and apply that to their RF mount systems, in addition to the more advanced technology of 2022, 23, 24, and whatever into the future. This is Canon putting its best foot forward in the lens market, and that is the RF mount system. And we touched on having the newer technology of the RF mount systems. That does include things like image stabilization. Many of the L series lenses have up to 5 stops of in-lens stabilization, and that can oftentimes pair with the actual camera body itself to give you upwards of 8 and 9 stops of image stabilization without using a gimbal. So that newer technology is going to be another pro. And in contrast to the EF lenses, the newer technology also gives us a smoother, less prominent focus breathing, as well as much quieter focusing motors. All pros for the RF mount lenses. It's not all sunshine and rainbows though when it comes to the RF lenses. When we use an RF lens specifically on the C70, there is no way to speed boost that. We're going to get a narrower field of view, and we're going to get technically 1 stop less of light than if we were to use the EF speed booster with the EF lenses. So that's something to take note of. Another con of the RF lens is it's going to be very expensive to get a professional quality lens. And that leads us into another con of the RF system, and that is that it is not fully developed. It is very new. And there are basically 2 buckets of lenses that you can buy that are RF mounts. One bucket is very expensive, very high quality L series lenses, and the other bucket is bottom of the barrel, just not good lenses, okay? So to be paired with the C70, which is a professional cinema camera, I think you're gonna also want the professional cinema standard of lenses. So it's gonna cost you a lot of money, and there are not a lot of options out there just yet. So that's another real con of using the RF lenses, is the cost of entry, as well as the fact that there are some gaps in that lens lineup. There are lenses that don't exist yet that Canon hasn't released, and they're also limiting third-party manufacturers' ability to make RF lenses. So you're kind of stuck with whatever Canon puts out on their time frame. That should give us a good platform to build our debate off of here as we talk about the Canon EF versus the RF lenses. These should be relatively indisputable facts that we can all agree on that we've just talked about. So it's time to introduce a little bit of my own bias, my own perception, the decision that I've made. So for my C70, I've decided to go with the Canon RF mount lenses. Now, I think one of the biggest reasons I went with the RF mount lens is because I wanted to put my stock in the future of the RF lens. I think Canon has already done some really incredible things with this lens, and I think the future is very bright, and it's a future I wanted to be a part of. I'm very much subject to FOMO, the fear of missing out. I'm the first one to watch new reviews on equipment that comes out, the latest and greatest tech. I love it. I consume that all the time. And I was in the EF camp watching what I believe Canon is going to do in the future, knowing that I was kind of stuck here because there are no more lenses coming out. That would cause some real angst inside of me, and that fear of missing out. It's not a great thing. It's probably a character flaw of mine, but I knew that I was going to need to be a part of the future of the RF lens, so here I am. Another reason I like the RF a lot, and again, this is a personal preference thing, I kind of view the RF and the EF mount systems like a Tesla and a muscle car, right? The muscle car is all the power and torque and horsepower that you're going to need. It's going to get the job done, and it's going to be sexy, right? The Tesla also has a ton of speed, ton of horsepower. It's going to get the job done, but it's a little bit more refined. The fit and finish is a little bit tighter, a little bit cleaner, and I find the new RF lenses, specifically the L series lenses, to be really well designed, to be really well manufactured. It's all tight and well refined. They've obviously put 30 years, 40 years of work into creating this lens that we have now today. And I love that they're a little bit smaller too, a little bit more compact. I mean, this is a 70-200, and this is, the size of what the EF lens is. So the RF mount, being able to fit down into something this small, packs away in my backpack much easier than the EF counterpart would be. So I like that as well. Now, because I went with the RF lens system, there are obviously a couple consequences, a couple trade-offs I've had to make that weigh heavily on my mind. A big one is the field of view that comes with the speed booster. There's definitely been some situations where I wish I could have gotten a little bit wider of a frame, but there's just not an RF lens out there yet that exists to fill that need for me. So I've missed out there. Sometimes an extra stop of light would have been great. So that weighs on my mind. Additionally, the versatility that comes with the EF lenses. I am a little bit concerned that my RF lenses can only ever be used on Canon RF cameras. Now, Red's got an RF mount out there now, so that's great. It's good to see. Again, I'm kind of investing into the future of the RF mount, so I feel good about it. Obviously, all of those concerns, the trade-offs, didn't weigh heavily enough for me to change my mind, and I don't think I would change my mind where I'm sitting today. I love these RF lenses for the way that I use them. That's how the math adds up in my head. I'd love to get your opinion on the matter. Let's take this down in the comments below and have a little bit of a dialogue amongst the community and maybe help somebody make the decision for themselves if they haven't already decided one way or the other, or they're thinking about making the switch. Let's carry that on down there. It is worth noting that I made this decision based on the Canon C70 being my primary camera, my A cam. Now, for the sake of time, we're going to move this conversation over to the next video. In that video, I'm going to talk about why I chose the Canon C70 and how the math added up to make that decision. But before we go, let's make sure we go down below, hit like, hit subscribe, do all the YouTube things, and I'll see you in the next video.